Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today, we're really digging into the Decameron project. This is that collection of short stories, that came right out of the COVID-19 pandemic. Our mission, really, is to see how it captures what we all went through during a global crisis and, well, how it connects to maybe older literary responses and why it still feels relevant now.
Yeah, and it's fascinating because the name itself, the Decameron Project, it's deliberately nodding towards Giovanni Boccaccio's original Decameron.
From the Black Death, right?
Exactly, written way back in medieval Italy during the plague. So you've got these two collections, centuries apart, but both born from these intense periods of, well, disease and isolation.
It shows that need for stories, I guess.
Definitely. Storytelling, connection, trying to make sense of things when the world feels upside down.
Okay, so let's unpack this modern one, the Decameron Project. How did it actually come about?
It was spearheaded by the New York Times. They brought together 29 authors, pretty prominent ones.
29, wow. That's a lot of different perspectives.
Oh, absolutely. And the diversity within the collection is, well, it's quite remarkable.
Like what kind of diversity are we talking about?
Well, genres all over the place. You've got sci-fi stories. I think one even had aliens dealing with their own quarantine protocols, believe it or not.
Seriously, aliens?
Yeah. And then you have, very personal essays about just being stuck at home with someone during lockdown.
Yeah.
The friction, the closeness, all that.
Okay, so genre and what else?
Story length, too.
Yeah.
Some are super short, maybe 5 pages.
Yeah.
Others are more like, 20 pages long.
With that much variety, was there a risk it might feel scattered? Or did that shared backdrop of the pandemic kind of hold it all together?
I think it actually strengthened it.
Yeah.
Because despite all those differences, genre, length, tone, that underlying shared experience of the pandemic.
The uncertainty.
Yeah, the uncertainty, the weird shifts in daily life, that collective hum of anxiety, it just creates this sense of immersion for the reader. You recognize it.
Right. It makes it relatable, even if the specific story is about aliens.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It shows how universal some of those feelings were, even if our individual situations were wildly different.
Okay, so here's where it gets really interesting for me. How did the authors actually use the pandemic in their stories? Was it always front and center?
Not always, no.
Yeah.
That's another layer of the diversity, actually. The source material points out a few different approaches.
Like what?
Well, some authors definitely made the pandemic the main theme. It was the subject. But others used it more like an introduction, or just a backdrop to maybe amplify characters' feelings, their isolation or anxieties.
Okay, so setting the scene almost.
Right. And then for some, it was even lighter touch, just part of casual conversation between characters or sort of background noise,
Yeah.
like hearing news reports faintly on a TV.
Did the source mention any specific stories that kind of stood out?
Yeah, it did mention a couple of personal favorites. There was one about a robbery.
A robbery during the pandemic.
Yeah. And another about a son who has to return home to live with his family. And what apparently made them feel fresh wasn't just the plot, but how they wove in those little pandemic details.
How so?
Well, imagine, the robber obsessively using hand sanitizer mid-heist, or the son struggling with Zoom calls from his old teenage bedroom.
Ah, okay. Those little specific things.
Exactly. Those small details, dropped into a story that wasn't only about the pandemic, really captured the feeling of the time. It showed how life, carried on, but differently.
That makes sense. It's the specifics that make it real. I remember, everyone suddenly baking bread or whatever their thing was, and thinking about time. The book came out in Japan, the source says, back in November 2021. But reading it now in 2024, the pandemic isn't the immediate crisis it was, but the memories are still pretty sharp. Does that change how you read it?
Oh, absolutely. Reading it now, you might get different insights, I think. A bit more perspective, maybe. It's not quite so raw.
Yeah, you can see it maybe a bit more clearly.
And if we kind of zoom out, connect this to the bigger picture, this collection really feels like a valuable historical document.
Like something people will look back on.
Definitely. Imagine someone finding this in, say, 20 or 30 years, maybe even, God forbid, during another kind of global crisis. It would be this incredible snapshot.
A reflection of how we coped, how we felt.
Precisely. Human resilience, adaptation, all of that. And it's kind of a neat detail that the source mentioned finding the book just at their local community center.
Oh, really? That accessible.
Yeah, which is great, right? Makes it part of the community it's reflecting.
That's true, though you wonder, for it to be a real historical document, maybe it needs wider recognition too. Or is that grassroots thing part of its strength?
Could be both, really. The local access makes it immediate, real.
Yeah.
But yeah, the quality of the writing and its significance probably deserve wider, maybe even academic attention too.
So when we boil it all down, what's the main takeaway from this deep dive? For me, it's how projects like this, these creative responses, just capture the sheer variety of human experience during something so huge. And our resilience, of course.
Absolutely. Which kind of leaves us with a thought, maybe for you listening. How do we, as individuals, as a society, how do we actually process and remember these big collective experiences?
What stories are we creating?
Exactly. What are the narratives we're building right now, maybe without even realizing it? They could end up being the Decamerons for people looking back in the future.
Something to think about. What stories are we telling ourselves and each other?